Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel and welcome to my May reading wrap up. This is my second time filming this video because I filmed it earlier today and the lighting was absolutely terrible and the video was just unsalvageable, and also I just was not speaking properly. I was stuttering the whole time, so I'm hoping that this one goes a lot better. I have been in a massive reading slump. I feel like this whole year I've been in a slump on and off, and I feel like I've said that every single month, but this month in particular has just been such a hard, draining month for me, and I don't know what it is in particular, but I just think I'm in like a life slump, and so it's just affecting every part of my life that I enjoy, including reading. And so even though I read a total of 11 books this month, I feel like I didn't love many of these books, and I didn't really read books that I really wanted to read. I was more just trying to read books that would pull me out of my slump, and it worked for a little bit each time, but then I'd just end up back in the slump. So I feel like this was just not very successful. But as usual, I'm going to start with statistics. I've done that the last 2 months and I've really enjoyed including them in my video. So I'm going to go over the statistics and then the genre breakdown. I feel like I can't say that word for some reason. It's like a tongue twister. So as I just said, I read a total of 11 books in the month of May, and I didn't actually have any DNFs this month, which is great. The last couple of months I have DNF'd a couple of books, but this month was successful in that sense. Out of those 11 books, I read a total of 4,059 pages. Very, very similar to last month. I think it's like 20 pages different from last month, which is really cool. My average rating of these books was 4.15, which is actually quite high. I was expecting it to be a lot lower because, as I said, I didn't love many of these books. And then out of the books that I set myself on my TBR at the beginning of the month, I actually ended up reading 0. It is so disappointing because I really wanted to read some of the books on that TBR, but as I said, because I've been in a slump, I just wasn't in the mood for any of them throughout the month. The genre breakdown is 2 general fiction books, 5 thrillers, 2 romances, and 2 fantasies. So now that I've gone through all of the statistics, let's get into the actual books that I read. This is not going to be in any particular order. It's just going to be the physical books first and then the 3 books that I don't have physical copies for. Okay, the first book I read in the month of May was The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald. This is actually my first ever classic that I read, and I read it for a reading vlog. It's not out on my channel yet, but it will hopefully be out in the next month or so. I honestly quite enjoyed this. I feel like as I was reading it, I wasn't understanding as much as I wanted to, but there was still quite a few quotes in there that I absolutely loved. I didn't fully annotate it. I literally just tabbed the quotes that I wanted to remember, so there's like less than 10 tabs in here, but I feel like that's just the way that I wanted to do it. I actually ended up watching the movie directly after I finished the book, which gave me such a better understanding of what actually happened in the book, so it made me appreciate the book a lot more because, as I said, as I was reading, I just felt a little bit lost and confused, and the movie really helped me to understand. Definitely want to read more classics after this, but I actually ended up giving it no rating because it just didn't feel right giving it a rating compared to how I rate other books. I was not expecting the ending of this book either. Like, it was actually quite sad, and especially in the movie it portrayed it in such a beautiful but devastating way. The next book I read was Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. I am so glad I'm finally continuing my journey into the Harry Potter universe. This has definitely been my favorite so far, and if you don't know, this is my first ever time reading the series and watching the series, so I actually have no idea what to expect, and I don't know how it ends or anything like that, so I'm definitely trying to avoid spoilers the most I possibly can. I just loved this so much because I feel like I connected to it a lot more. The characters felt a lot more mature, and so I feel like I could relate to them a lot more in this book. I feel like the first 3 books feel a little bit more childish, whereas this one, they're finally growing up. And I also just loved the Triwizard Tournament. Like, that whole vibe and like the little trials and stuff was so fun, and I just loved following along with Harry in this book. Like, it's been my favorite so far, and I wasn't expecting to love any of the books in this series as much as this, so I ended up giving this one 4.5 stars, which is great. Then I read Funny Story by Emily Henry, which I believe came out at the end of April. I don't know what it is about this book, but for some reason I don't actually have much recollection of what I actually read, but I'm gonna try my best to give you guys a synopsis of this book. Pretty much it's following our main characters Daphne and Miles, who both get cheated on by their partners, and the partners cheat with each other. So then Miles and Daphne end up living together in this situation because they both don't really have anywhere to live, and they've both been cheated on. Like, they're relating to each other, they can kind of like find comfort in each other. Miles is a very misunderstood character, and I loved him so much, and I've seen a lot of people like dragging his character and saying he's a horrible person and all of this stuff. I had a soft spot for him from the beginning of this book, and I love when I have that for a character because it just makes him feel so much more real. But this definitely wasn't my favorite Emily Henry book. My favorite is still Beach Read. Like, I stand by that, and I don't know when that will change, but I still really enjoyed this, and I feel like if you've never read an Emily Henry book and you want to start, this would be a great place to start. And I ended up giving it 4 stars, which is a really good rating. reading. The next book I read was The Roots Run Deep by Chris Strong, and I feel like I must preface this by saying I did read this as a paid review over on TikTok, but my opinions will always be honest and genuine about a book anyway, and I absolutely loved this with everything. If you loved A Little Life by Hanya Nagahara, this gives like the same vibe as that. It made me feel so many different emotions. I cried multiple times in this, and it's literally like a 200-page book. Going into it, I wasn't expecting to connect with it and love it as much because it is so short. Like I was like, what could possibly be in a book so short to make me love it? But it was literally like A Little Life without the gruesome, disgusting things that happened in that. And I love A Little Life with everything. Like that's one of my favorite books ever, and this just made me feel the same as that. So I adored this book. I gave it 5 stars. It does cover a lot of triggering subjects as well, the main one being suicide, so you definitely need to take precautions when you're reading this, but I absolutely adored this, and it's such a quick and easy read. Like I read it in one sitting. The next book I read was Heir of Broken Kingdom by Mads Rafferty, which is a sequel to Heir of Broken Fate. I can't really talk about this book too much because it is a sequel, and obviously I don't want to spoil anything, but I absolutely loved this. Again, absolutely loved the first book. I gave the first book 5 stars and I gave this one 4 stars. This is again following Delilah and Nox. Delilah is the king's daughter in like the normal world, and then Nox is the Fae king. So it does have Fae, it has mermaids, it has a lot of like magical creatures in this series, which I love. And that's all I'm going to tell you because, as I said, I can't really say anything about this book, but I did really enjoy it, and I wasn't expecting what happened at the end of this book. Like that was so shocking and heartbreaking. Like it made me feel so many different emotions, and I love that because I love a book that can pull out different emotions in me. The next book I read was Survive the Night by Riley Sager. This is like when I go into reading a lot of thrillers to try to get out of my slump. So this one is following a girl whose roommate goes missing at university, and no one knows where she's gone, but they do think that someone has taken her, and so she just needs to get out of this university. She's sick of all of this stuff happening around her, and so she hitches a ride with this guy from her university, and it's like a really long road trip. So they decide to go on this road trip together, and she doesn't even know the guy, and along the way she starts finding out all of these really strange things about this guy, like he's lying about who he is. And that's all I'm gonna tell you about this book. This book like literally just kept me on the edge of my seat the whole time. It made me feel so much anxiety, but at the same time I just wanted to see what was gonna happen. I think like all of the thrillers I read this book was through audiobooks because I have found a new love for listening to thrillers as an audiobook for some reason, but I honestly really enjoyed this, and I ended up giving it 4 stars. The next book I read was also by Riley Sager, and that was The Only One Left. This has definitely been one of my favorites from him after Home Before Dark. Like this was amazing, and I didn't appreciate it as much when I was reading it, but now that I think back, like it was so well done and so well put together. This one kind of gives like Verity from Colleen Hoover slash the Housemaid series from Frida McFadden, and it's like put into one, but then it's even made better. So it's following a caregiver who goes to this house to look after a lady called Lenora Hope, and allegedly she mass murdered her entire family when she was a kid, and so now she's like an elderly lady that needs to be looked after, and the caregiver Kit is honestly like really scared to be looking after her, but she kind of feels like a connection with her. This book was literally just phenomenal. Like it was so well done. Like I did not expect anything that happened in this, and I feel like every single chapter in this book had like a twist and something we found out, which is like one of my favorite things in a thriller book, where there's just like twist upon twist upon twist. And I ended up giving this one 4.5 stars. The next one is A Novel Love Story by Ashley Poston, which is actually a physical ARC copy, which I'm so grateful to have received. So thank you, HarperCollins. I have read 2 other books from Ashley Poston before this one, and I loved both of them, and this was no exception. I think this was the perfect cute little romance palette cleanser, and it's actually coming out in June as well, so it's like the perfect time for me to be talking about this. I'm gonna do my best to explain the synopsis of this because it's a little bit confusing, but pretty much it's following our main female character, and she's meant to be going on this trip with her book club, and then they all end up cancelling on her, so she decides to go alone, and she ends up breaking down in this small town. I feel like that's where all of these sort of small town stories begin, and it's not just any small town, it actually happens to be the small town of her favorite book series, and the people that are in the town are actually from the book series, so they're like real people, and it's like a little bit confusing, but this book was just so beautiful, so cute. I absolutely loved it. I gave it 3.75 stars, but I was in a slump when I was reading this, so I'd probably bump it up to a 4-star rating, and I am so excited for it to actually come out so I can get like the proper cover and everything. Now that I've gone through all of the physical books that I read in May, I'm going to talk about the 3 books that I don't have copies for. The first one is The Perfect Child by Lucinda Berry. This is the only other book I gave 5 stars in May. This this book was absolutely phenomenal, and I'm going to try to explain the synopsis of this one as well. It's pretty much following this married couple who very much struggle to get pregnant, so that's definitely a trigger warning in this book. And the mum has recently lost her baby, so she's staying at home and not working, and then the husband is a doctor. And in this town they live in, there is this young girl who is found. She has been abused, abandoned, and she's obviously taken into the hospital. There's a whole ongoing police investigation and no one knows who she belongs to. And so this married couple that's struggling to get pregnant actually end up adopting this girl. And that's all I'm going to tell you, but pretty much everything starts going wrong from there. This book is literally like my biggest fears about having a child put into one book. Like it was just traumatic, and I just feel so bad for so many of the characters in this book who I'm not going to name because it would be a spoiler. But I just think this book was so well done and so well put together, and it was my second Lucinda Berry book, and I loved the other book I read from her as well, which was Saving Noah. Seriously cannot wait to read more books from this author because the two books I've read I've absolutely loved. The second last book I read was The House Across the Lake by Riley Sager. This is one that has very mixed reviews. I feel like people either really love this book or absolutely hate it, and I'm actually going to look up a synopsis for this one because I really don't know how to explain it, and I feel like I don't really have much recollection of it either. Okay, so pretty much it's following our main female character, and I think she's like a widow because her husband passed away in this lake that they live across from. She uncovers secrets about her lake house neighbors and herself as she plays voyeur, is that how to say it? Voyeur, through a pair of binoculars. So she's watching all of her neighbors through binoculars, and then she finds out all this stuff that's happening and then inserts herself into all of these horrible situations that are happening. And that's like pretty much the only way you can describe what happened in this book. I definitely enjoyed it, but it was definitely not something that I absolutely fell in love with or anything. Like I enjoyed my experience reading it, or technically listening to it, because that was another audiobook I listened to, but I just didn't love it as much as I thought I would, so I gave it 3.75 stars. And then the last book I read was another one I listened to as an audiobook, which was Gone Girl by Gillian Flynn. This is like one of those iconic psychological thrillers. Like this one has also been made into a movie, which I watched straight after I finished the book, and I honestly really enjoyed it. I gave it 3.5 stars, but I still did enjoy the story. It's following a husband and wife, and one day the husband comes home from wherever he's been the day and his wife is missing. She's just gone, vanished, no one knows where she is, and the house has also been left like a mess. Like it looks like a crime scene, and so there's an ongoing investigation straight away, and the first person the police look into all the time is always the husband, so obviously he is being investigated throughout this book. And that's all I'm gonna say. I don't want to spoil anything else, but I wasn't expecting anything that happened in this book. But I do feel like the reason why it wasn't a higher rating for me is just because it's quite a long book. Like I think it's like over 500 pages, and so a lot of it was very repetitive and boring, and I feel like it could have been condensed a lot more, and it did take me quite a few weeks to actually listen to and finish because it was so long. But I still did enjoy it overall, and I absolutely loved the movie as well. But anyway, that was the last book that I read in the month of May, so I really hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope you got some recommendations from this, and I'm really hoping that June is a better reading month for me, because obviously this one wasn't very successful in my own opinion, but I still did read quite a few books this month. If you got to the end of the video, thank you so much for watching. Leave a comment letting me know what your favorite read was in May, because I'd love to know and I'd love to get some more recommendations. But with all of that being said, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in my next one.